Hey, it's Coach T, and this is another one of my quick code videos for adult or maybe adolescent learners of Python who are struggling with some of the basics. My goal with creating these quick videos is to give you the focus on one particular function or one particular thing to do in Python, hopefully explain it in a practical and easy to understand manner, and then move out of the way so that you can practice on your own. So far, I've done a number of these videos. I'm a part of a couple different learning communities because I am also learning to program myself. So my goal here is to learn by teaching things that I've been practicing for a couple of months and really cement them in my own long-term memory. But I'm hoping that this serves somebody. So if you like this kind of direct, practical approach to learning, subscribe and all that doodad stuff down at the bottom. But I'm going to move on into showing you how to use a loop to increment and also to control a loop. So I've got a couple examples baked into this video, which I'm going to try to keep below 8 minutes. And I'm going to show you the very first form of this, which is an incrementer inside of a for loop. If you don't know how to write a for loop, or you're not sure about the syntax, or you're struggling with them, I have a video on that. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I am just trying to help people learn, so don't worry about that. But go back and watch my for loop where I show you how you can think about a for loop using a deck of cards. So we want to use a counter for a variety of reasons. Maybe I'm looking for how many times something occurs inside of a range or inside of a string or inside of a collection of some sort, or maybe I'm trying to just make sure that the loop doesn't run forever, right? So in this case, I have for I, where that's the temporary variable, in range 1 to a million. So I don't actually want my computer to run a million of these loops. I only want it to run a certain number of them. That's computationally more conservative. It's a little bit gentler on the computer, and it prevents really long hang times while it finishes out an execution that you don't care about. You want to stop the loop as soon as possible in order to conserve memory. So here's my setup again for I in range 1 to a million. If I modulo 10 is exactly equal to 0, or in other words, if I is perfectly divisible by 10, we're going to raise my counter up here by 1. And then we're also going to print that number is divisible by 10. And then if the counter is greater than 10, meaning we found 10 numbers that are divisible by 10, we're going to break out of the loop. And this part is optional, but it does ensure that we don't run to a million. So we're going to find a lot of numbers between 1 and a million that are divisible by 10. And again, it's more resource efficient to have some sort of a control function there to turn off the loop as soon as you're ready. Arbitrarily, I decided that we were going to do this at 10. So let's run this loop, and it's going to print the count. It's going to print the numbers that are divisible by 10. But you know what I should also do is I should print the counter at the end, because once the loop breaks out, because A, that tells us that the loop broke out, and B, we're also starting with a value of 0, but let's see how high it gets by the end. Oops, I'm going to rerun that loop real quick just so that we can see it more clearly. Maybe. Come on, Python. There we go. Okay, so 10 is divisible by 10, 20, 20. Okay, and then eventually we get 11, right? So we get 11 executions before it runs. We only run to 110. We don't run to a million, and it's significantly quicker that way. And if you know Python, if you're starting to learn about it, you do know it is not the most efficient in terms of energy or speed language. So anywhere where you can clip a couple milliseconds, it's going to help. So the reason that it runs to 11 is because I didn't specify that it's greater than or equal to 10. It hits 10 and it goes, okay, we're still able to run because we haven't gone over 10. So then it hits 110, and that's where we get our 11th digit. So that's how you could use an incrementer in a for loop, right? And it's just for kind of calculation and making sure that we have control over how long that loop executes. I could also just specify that this only goes to 100. You can be specific, but sometimes you don't know what the upper range is going to be, or you want to give yourself lots of space. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to move up to our next example, which is an example of an incrementer in a while loop, our other type of loop, which I also have a video on with the Quick Code series. So now I have new counter, which equals 0, and while true, which if you know your while loops at this point, you know that that is like a game or a software loop. It'll run until something acts on this to make it not true. which I do not have set up in this particular example. So it'll run infinitely. The user input equals input, and we'll type anything to increment by 1, and then we have a data validator loop, which I'm going to cover in the next video. But basically, I'm just going to double check to make sure that the user's not hitting enter. So as long as user input is not enter and giving me an empty string, it'll raise the counter by 1, it'll print the new counter. Okay, so let's run the loop at this point. While true, running infinitely, we're taking user input, and then if that input is not empty, we're going to raise the counter by 1, and we'll print the new counter each time so we can see it going up. And let's just delete that real quickly just so that we can see clearly again. Come on, VS Code. There we go. All right, here we go. Type anything to increment by 1. If I hit that, it didn't go up. See, we didn't get a report. I just hit enter. If I type R1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so forth. As long as I type anything in, it will increment upwards by 1. Why would you use that? I have no idea. That's up to you as the programmer to figure out the use case there. But that's how you do it. We got a third example here, a little bit more complicated now. And you can see just because it's longer, right? Okay, I had a brief pause there. I just realized that I had forgotten a break keyword that was causing me a little bit of an issue. So we want to nest an incrementer in a while loop inside of a for loop, and the goal here is to scan through this word string variable, which says Coach T likes to teach Python basics, because it's a great way for me to learn. I just learned something that I had apparently forgotten. We have a letter counter that's going to count all of the C's. So for I in word string dot lower to make sure that we don't have to account for capital and lowercase c's. We're just going to treat everything as if it's lowercase. While my letter counter is less than 5, then if I is exactly equal to C, all lowercase, right? Then we're going to raise that letter counter by 1. We'll leave out of that if loop, and then we will break. And the break kicks us out of the while loop so that we can move on to the next letter inside of our string, because the for loop is effectively treating this string as if it was a list, which is what we want, right? It allows us to analyze it. So I wrote this, I know how many C's are in this sentence, and that's how I knew that I broke my own code, because I forgot to put the break in the right place. We're going to see that there should be 4 C's, right? If I highlight it, Python will actually, or Visual Studio Code will actually show me where the C's are. So 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So it's going to start here and go, okay, that's my first I. While the letter count is less than 5, okay, it's less than 5 because it's 0. If it's equal to a C, we're going to raise the letter counter by 1. Then it's going to scan. This O fails to meet this condition, so the whole while loop will get skipped. Same thing for the A. The next C will trigger another letter counter going up, and then it'll go like that all the way through the code, allowing us to effectively scan it. So let me start that like this. Great, Baldur's Gate is done, finally. It's been downloading for almost a day. Come on, VS Code, what are you doing? There we go. Okay, so it scans through and it says there are 4 C's in word string, right? So this type of nested incrementer allows me, it's not the most efficient way, but it's an example. It allows me to scan through and figure out, hey, is there a target that I'm looking for? And the while loop gives me additional control over that, because let's say that I added a whole bunch more. Likes to teach basics to all sorts of folks who want to learn to code for a I need words that start with C here that would make sense. For a circus, for circuses and corporations that sell carburetors or something like that. So now I have way more than 5 C's. Maybe I'm only using this while loop just to validate that I have enough C's, because I have, I don't know, a design budget telling me that I must have a minimum number of C's in any string that I send. Or search engine optimization, I don't know, something like that. I'm going to get the same effect though. It's just going to tell me there are at least 5 C's in this one. So that's a way to nest it and to get additional control. And that's kind of the point of the whole video, to show you how you can use an incrementer to give you control over over how you use your loops. So it's powerful. There are many different ways that you could use this. Hopefully it's valuable, and if you like this type of focused look and honest look, because I screwed this one up a little bit, into Python as a learner, subscribe, and I'm going to continue to make more as I see more topics that I think people might benefit from getting a refresher on, or a kind of practical head first look. So that's it. Thanks, and I will see you in the next one.